As the sun rose over Portsmouth Harbour one spring morning in 2023, National Crime Agency narcotics officers were secretly observing an unusual burst of activity. The Atlantic Klipper, a vessel loaded with bananas bound for British grocery stores, had docked from Colombia, and port workers appeared hastily separating two specific pallets from the main shipment to another section of the docks. Later that day, these pallets were transferred to a truck and transported over 100 miles to a commercial property near Lichfield connected to a Mr. Jonathan Arnold. Arnold believed he was receiving a 1.5-ton shipment of cocaine worth £118 million on the street. Instead, he and his associates discovered they had fallen into a trap. Dutch authorities had discovered the cocaine 3 days earlier during the ship's brief stopover in Vlissingen and had replaced it with decoy packages. You are watching OCG TV. We've all heard stories about how people end up in the drug trade. Usually it's about someone from a tough background who saw crime as their only way out. But what about someone who had every advantage in life? This is how Jonathan Arnold, the privileged private schoolboy, went on to be the mastermind behind one of the biggest cocaine smuggling operations in UK history. Behind the facade of a legitimate furniture removal business, Arnold and his gang were responsible for importing nearly 2 tons of cocaine, heroin and ketamine into the UK, drugs with a street value of £135 million. Growing up, Jonathan Arnold didn't fit the profile of a future drug kingpin. The only child of successful parents, Jonathan grew up with privilege most can only dream of. His parents, Sue and John Arnold, waited 10 years to have a child before Jonathan was born. They spared no expense on his upbringing, sending him to prestigious Repton School, the same alma mater as author Roald Dahl and TV personality Jeremy Clarkson, at a cost of £10,000 a term. At Repton, Arnold wasn't just another face in the crowd. He excelled in sports, starring in both the cricket and football teams. Later, local newspapers would highlight his record-breaking performances for Tamworth Rugby Club, where he scored more points than anyone else for 2 consecutive seasons. A gifted athlete who even trained for Aston Villa Football Club, his future seemed bright. After school, he joined his father's successful nationwide sign-erecting business, working on projects across the country and specializing in the pub trade. When COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020, the family business suffered. Staff were laid off, and Jonathan began to cover the extra work, taking on the workload of 2 men. He found himself physically pushed to the limit. The long hours and stress began to take a toll. So to keep up with the punishing schedule of early morning starts and long journeys across the country, Arnold turned to tramadol. He combined it with energy drinks, and this cocktail with the drug helped him stay awake and push through exhaustion. But tramadol is highly addictive, and before long, Arnold was taking as many as 20 tablets a day. Prolonged use of tramadol can severely compromise judgment, memory, awareness, and mental function. Through this period, he had set up his own removals company. He was seemingly taking a positive path, but was making irrational decisions. He had already started associating with some questionable characters who were soon made fully fledged employees of his young business. This proved to have a negative effect on his company. Customers' furniture was being stolen from his unit and vans trashed, jeopardizing the reputation through numerous complaints from clients. Arnold had a misplaced loyalty to his new associates, attempting to keep people in their jobs when his own business was failing. He became aggressive towards friends or family when offered advice or pointing out that the characters he was contracting to carry out the operations were less than salubrious. With his removal business struggling financially, the offer of moving into the underworld proved too tempting to resist. So what started as a way to stay awake during long drives had spiraled into a full-blown addiction that would ultimately lead Arnold down a path that would change his life forever. Real estate removal started as a legitimate business venture. You know, hard work and make good legal money. But when introduced to the underworld, he saw something far more lucrative than moving furniture: the perfect cover for drug smuggling operations. The gang would use dummy loads of furniture to hide packages of drugs in lorries and vans. Some vehicles even had compartments specially built into the floor to conceal shipments. From the outside, it all looked legitimate, just another furniture removal company with vans crossing back and forth to Europe. But the scale of their operation was anything but small time. This was industrial-level drug trafficking that would eventually catch the attention of authorities across multiple countries. The group became known to police in January 2022 when one of Arnold's couriers made a drug run to Europe in a real estate removals van. Intelligence led French customs officers to search the vehicle and found 63 blocks of cocaine weighing 71 kilograms, along with 99 bags of ketamine weighing 101 kilograms. The drugs had a UK wholesale value of more than £2.5 million. But there was bigger things to come. The biggest seizure in the case came in April 2022, involving a staggering amount of drugs. Arnold and his gang attempted to import almost 1,500 kilograms of cocaine with a street value of around £118 million through Portsmouth docks. The drugs were hidden inside pallets of bananas on a ship that had travelled from Colombia. To execute a shipment at this scale successfully, insiders are typically needed. People who can make sure the product makes it through customs without anyone asking questions. And, as it turns out, 2 corrupt port workers were more than down for it. Michael Jordan and David Oliver, both 45, were essential to the operation's success. As port workers, they had legitimate access to the docks and knew the systems and security procedures inside out. They were the perfect inside men for a drug trafficking organization looking to smuggle massive quantities of cocaine into the UK. Their job was to ensure the shipment could enter the country undetected. They would use their position to facilitate the entry of unauthorized vehicles into the port area and help divert attention away from the suspicious cargo. Jordan could be seen on CCTV maneuvering pallets he believed contained the drugs into a separate warehouse. In exchange, the men expected to make substantial sums of money, far more than their regular salaries. Instead of riches, their choices led them to financial ruin. The group had not heeded the earlier warning when the shipment was intercepted in France, as the Dutch also knew the shipment was coming. When the ship made a planned stop in the Netherlands, Dutch authorities seized the cocaine and informed their UK counterparts. Rather than shut down the operation immediately, they allowed the ship to continue its journey to Portsmouth, minus the drugs, which had been removed. This gave British authorities a perfect opportunity to watch the operation unfold and identify all the players involved. Among them was Ahmet Aydin, a Turkish lorry driver who was recruited to pick up the load from Portsmouth. Aydin's role was to drive the unauthorized HGV into the port, collect what he thought would be the cocaine-laden bananas, and transport them out of the port area. Humayun Sadiq, one of Arnold's co-conspirators, waited outside Portsmouth docks in a car for Aydin to exit with the drugs. Sadiq then followed the HGVs to a motorway service station north of Winchester. From there, Arnold and others took control of moving what they believed were the drugs to premises Arnold had rented in Staffordshire. They were being watched every step of the way by law enforcement. It wasn't that easy at first. These gang members weren't amateurs. They had hidden compartments in trucks, corrupt port workers on the inside, an international network spanning from Colombia to the Netherlands to the UK, but the cops were just as cunning, hiding listening devices in amongst the replacement bricks to gain those final strands of incriminating evidence. By June 2022, investigators had connected another driver, Connor Fletcher, to the smuggling network. Fletcher, 25, from Wolverhampton, travelled to a town near Amsterdam for what appeared to be an overnight trip. On his return journey, Border Force officers stopped him at Dover. Hidden in 2 secret compartments built into the floor of his lorry, they discovered 60 kilograms of cocaine. Meanwhile, James Jenkins had been working as Arnold's associate, helping to arrange drivers and oversee various aspects of the operation. The sophistication of the enterprise was impressive, but it was now unraveling rapidly. In March 2022, Arnold was apprehended by the authorities. He was accused of being the head of the organized crime group that utilized a furniture removal enterprise as a facade for the importation of a colossal quantity of narcotics into the United Kingdom from Colombia, Europe, and South America. He had made little attempt to conceal the financial advantages derived from his illicit operations. Despite his privileged background, his lifestyle had escalated significantly to include extravagant journeys to Dubai, where he documented himself operating a rented Ferrari. The acquisition of a Rolex timepiece and numerous other luxury items may well have come from clean money, but when accused of large-scale narcotics distribution in parallel, it didn't do his defense any favors. To casual observers and his social media audience, Mr. Arnold presented the image of a prosperous young entrepreneur enjoying the rewards of legitimate commercial success. The truth, however, was considerably more sinister. The subsequent investigation revealed that what appeared to be a legitimate enterprise generating approximately £50,000 monthly was, in fact, merely a sophisticated facade concealing an extensive narcotics importation operation valued at tens of millions of pounds. West Midlands Police called the operation the most significant drug supply operation they had ever dealt with. Officers from multiple forces, West Midlands, Staffordshire, Warwickshire and West Mercia worked together in the regional organised crime unit to dismantle the gang's operations. It should be noted that Mrs. Arnold's maternal parent, Susan Arnold, previously held the position of Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for Staffordshire and had formally presented herself as a candidate for parliamentary election representing the Conservative Party. While there exists no evidence to suggest awareness of her son's illicit enterprises, the profound irony remains inescapable. The offspring of an individual whose professional responsibility had been to ensure police accountability had constructed an extensive narcotics distribution network without detection by authorities. The House of Cards had to collapse eventually, and when it did, it came crashing down hard. Detective Chief Superintendent Jenny Scrim, who leads the West Midlands Regional Organised Crime Unit, made it clear just how serious the case was. "We can't underestimate the scale of this operation. This is the largest drug case we've ever handled. The gang was operating at the highest levels of crime, smuggling huge amounts of drugs into the West Midlands and beyond." Tim Burton, Specialist Prosecutor for the Crown Prosecution Service, described it as a highly sophisticated criminal operation, adding that the drugs the gang tried to import were on an immense scale. As a result, each person involved got a sentence that matched their role in the crime. In May 2023, James Jenkins, Humayun Sadiq and Connor Fletcher were found guilty at Birmingham Crown Court of conspiring to import drugs. Jordan and Oliver, the corrupt port workers, were prosecuted separately by the National Crime Agency, with Jordan receiving a 21-year sentence after a retrial, having previously been freed by a hung jury. Aydin, the Turkish lorry driver, was also convicted for his role in the scheme. Arnold himself pleaded guilty to 3 counts of conspiring to import drugs and 1 count of conspiring to supply Class A drugs. In July 2023, he was sentenced to 23 years and 6 months in prison. At just 30 years old, he faced the prospect of spending most of his youth and early middle age behind bars. Jenkins was sentenced to 15 years, Fletcher to 12 years, and Sadiq received the harshest punishment of the group, 27 years imprisonment. Game over. Arnold and his crew are locked up now, but we all know how this goes. As long as people want drugs and there's money to be made, someone else will step up to replace them, even if they've got everything to lose, just like Jonathan Arnold did.